So we have Katharina, Katharina Maurer, the mediator at Community Mediation Services in Queens, New York, with Martin Applebaum, writer and mediator with the Community Mediation Services in Queens, New York. Please, let's give them a round of applause.
So, hello everybody, welcome to our presentation, Opening Up in Awareness, exploring how mindfulness and meditation can enhance the mediation process. We've already been introduced. I also want to add that apart from us being mediators, we are both also long-term practitioners of meditation in the Buddhist context. And so, based on our experience and insights, we consider Buddhist philosophy to hold profound insights into the human mind and heart as it relates to the emergence and transformation of conflicts. So we do think that this, as we call it, Buddhist conflict transformation, is actually a great complement to traditional Western approaches to conflict transformation, which focus more on altering systems and structures, as Buddhist conflict transformation is really emphasizing and empowering the individual to understand the processes of the human mind that create division, isolation, insecurity, dissatisfaction, and all of them possibly leading to destructive conflict. So in our experience, mindfulness and meditation practice as a self-awareness practice, when brought into human interaction and relationships, can loosen the grip of the me versus the others, the positional stances that underlie each and every conflict.
You can hit the clicker.
Yeah.
I just want to begin by saying that what I've heard over the last day today is that there are many ways of approaching what's called in the West alternative dispute resolution, and we've heard a variety of approaches. What we're offering from the Buddhist perspective is something that could really underlie and work with any perspective that someone takes in responding to conflict. So we're going to set the stage for the Buddhist approach by talking about the Four Noble Truths. These are the foundational concepts and realizations that the Buddha, a person, discovered for himself, and in his view, he believes any person can discover these values for themselves. It's not really, in essence, a dogmatic viewpoint. It's one that one might investigate for themselves. And that is that the first is human existence is pervaded by suffering. We all live in a world in which we have dis-ease. We have dis-ease with our bodies. We have dis-ease with the world around us and how we perceive it and what we want and can't get. And what conflict is, in essence, is this dis-ease with our present circumstance. We're here and we want to be there. We have this, but we want to have that. There is a root to suffering. That's the second noble truth that he discovered. And that root is variously desire. It's the desire for something you don't have. It's the clinging to things you do have that you're afraid you're going to lose. It's everything that comes out of attachment and aversion. And those are functions that most human beings are afflicted with. And this suffering can be ended, and it can be ended by ending the affliction, by ending the sense that you are separate from others, that you are separate from this moment. And there is a prescribed path to determine how to go forward. And that is what's called the Noble Eightfold Path. And it's made up of all of the parts that you see, which are basically all of the human aspects of moral conduct, wisdom, insight, in word, thought, and deed. And so the first one, for example, right view, would be the Four Noble Truths. That's the kind of jumping off place for Buddhism, in which you begin to understand that the separations that you're making between yourself and others and between what you have and you want, all of these habitual constructs that we have, biases about others, these are things that we can loosen. And we do that by trying to make right intention, speech, action, effort, having the right livelihood, and using some tools, which we'll talk about later, mindfulness and also concentration. The Buddhist understanding of conflict is that, as I've said, there may be a problem that, a water resource that must be shared. That's a problem. But a destructive conflict arising out of that problem is the water must be mine, and the other should not have it or does not deserve to have it. They shouldn't have access to it, or less than I do. Therefore, we have maladaptive responses, as the quote says, to what's actually taking place in our world. And finally, the Buddhist understanding of peace is the absence of an afflictive, habitual process that leads to the hardening of myself as opposed to others, and a separation from this moment. And we're going to come to the realization that this peace, from a Buddhist standpoint, is something that's not ideologically based. It's not top-down, but it comes from the inside of people. It comes from their ability to look through their own experience and to see the fault lines of it. Thank you.
So Martin already mentioned right view, so I want to go with that pretty quickly. So in that Noble Eightfold Path, there are two steps, even though the entire path is actually to be seen as one. You got to go through all the steps, one being interdependent on the other, to actually transform yourself and to transform society. But again, there is right view, and there is another one about which I'm going to speak in a second, which is particularly profound for conflict transformation. As we know, as mediators, views have wide-ranging impact as they govern our attitudes, our choices, our goals, our actions, and those of the people at the table. As Buddhism holds, if we hold a wrong view, it will lead us towards courses of action that eventuate suffering, and the other way around with the right view. So it is of utmost importance to, on a daily basis, that is what Buddhism suggests, investigate our strongly held opinions and assumptions, and to see what is beneath them that is actually driving both internal and external frictions and conflict. So biases is one, Martin already mentioned it, and another one that Buddhism really likes to talk about and emphasizes is the over-identification that we have, especially with our thoughts, as we assume that what we think, interpret, perceive as actually our subjective reality is an objectively valid truth. And then the second one, which we're just going to mention for the sake of our presentation, our paper, is mindfulness, right mindfulness in the Eightfold Path. As we commonly understand mindfulness here in the West, it's a big thing, right? So as we commonly understand it, it's like sitting on the cushion, doing a breath meditation, being very one-pointed, either again on the breath, sounds, feelings, thoughts, but not really like open to the entire experience, like everything going on, all our internal processes. It's very, very narrow for a good reason, to be better able to focus and to concentrate. It all has its purposes for sure. But it has a pitfall in the context of Buddhist ethics, because it doesn't see that greater context, where Buddhist ethics is defining mindfulness as being linked to mindful analysis of human processes on all scales, mental, emotional, physical. And so that is what we're talking about when we mention mindfulness in our paper, in our presentation. is really to use this full potential of mindfulness. We have to bring that completely into interactions, like the complete openness to what is going on inside of ourselves at any given moment, and therefore seeing that in others as well, the human processes.
I don't know how to do it. So, you know, if you just take a moment and you breathe, you know, and you just center on your breath. And some of you were here this morning, and there was a little meditation in the morning, and you know, some people spoke about some difficulty in doing it, and what comes up are thoughts or feelings, and you realize that you don't really have control over all of that, and that's what we're talking about in mindfulness, that just is here and is watching a series of processes that come up, some of which may involve unpleasant things and which may involve bias or you know, habitual response, negative responses. And when you take a mindful attitude, you can get past those biases, those habitual responses, to more of an openness in which it's not me against the world, but us. And so mindfulness can enter into, next one, a spacious awareness. And that spacious awareness sees conflict differently, because it's now set in the context of us, and it's a problem solving that we are doing together. And it sees each person not as a position in which I must, you know, dominate or win, but as a multi-dimensional person, not a you know, two-dimensional other. And so that's what we're trying to do when we undertake meditation and we bring it into interpersonal relations, is to continue to do that process in the face of another and with another.
So in our experience, mediation is actually in and of itself a meditative act. It's actually in and of itself a meditative act, especially what Martin already mentioned. If the mediator is willing and capable of approaching the situation, the conflict, from a point of awareness of what is. That is being, again, like open to your own inner processes, being aware of them, and being aware of the processes of the people at the table. You can see that, you can feel it, you can notice it, especially if you're tuned in with yourself, without habitually reacting to what is going on. So I'm noticing I'm judging, I'm noticing I'm biased, but I'm not reacting to it right away. And I bring that presence to the table. That is really like raising the awareness at the table. So in our opinion, the process of mediation, which is like the commonly trained mediation here, at least in the US, already holds a lot of hooks for awareness. And these are 5 different ones, 5 of those dimensions. Number 1 is engaging in open listening. Open listening means like really being present with your mind and your heart. So how are you going to do that, being that open? You do have to reach a certain kind of awareness. You do have to reach a certain kind of presence, which we see being done in meditation and mindfulness. And that is also focusing on empathy and non-judgment, instead of getting entangled into positions, getting confused by positions, which so often, I think, in my experience, happens to the mediator as well. And therefore trying to seek solutions right away, rather than just like letting things happen in this moment, seeing like how things unfold and gently steering them. Number 2 is restating what is spoken and reframing it. That's one of the most beautiful tools of mediation, I believe, in which you can really see, once the speaker is validated and he or she feels like he or she is being heard, that opens up awareness, like that opens up the conversation to a completely different level. Another one done by the mediator is asking gentle probing questions, so to bring habitual positions and reactions to light, rather than like trying to investigate it more from a legal perspective or more from a factual perspective, really trying to go underneath things. A way to do that is also to listen. Again, that's what the mediator could do in an aware capacity. To listen to what is not being said, that is facial expression, bodily expression, silent gaps. And by that creating space for what is unacknowledged to emerge. Should the people at the table, the conflict parties, be open for that? You know, I see you're tense, your shoulders are tense. you know, what's going on there? Do I see that correctly, or do I observe that correctly? And like trying to steer it away from what is just being said, which is again positions most of the time. And then throughout the entire process, really focusing on moving from what I want versus what they want to what we want together, the common ground. That should be like everything that the mediator in his or her awareness is focusing on, steering the conversation that direction. And this way, the mediator creates a deeply empathic conversation, enabling all at the table to see through their identity-based suffering, which again, in Buddhist understanding, underlies our destructive conflicts, or our conflicts in general.
So just to conclude, you know, Buddhism is seeing the individual in the first instance as the peacemaker, and that individuals operating in the Noble Eightfold Path with each other are producing a society and interpersonal relations which are gentle and compassionate and kind and solution-oriented and we-oriented. It's about seeing relations and problems more inclusively then. And this Buddhist idea of suffering, of a fundamental dis-ease that each of us has, and trying to get to the root of it, is a practical way to implement conflict resolution. It's a way that I think I've heard today is saying, you know, when people were saying, well, you know, love your neighbor. How do you do that? That's the difficult part. And this is a kind of underlying methodology of how to approach, how we can approach each other in a beneficial way. I'd just like to finally conclude with some suggestions of what we can do in terms of mediation. And we believe that meditation should be something that mediators are offered to train in because of its value in creating openness and seeing through bias, and introducing meditation and awareness practices into mediation, into the mediation process itself, getting people to breathe, getting people, as Katharina said, to notice, be aware of their bodies and relax into themselves, all of that. And to train communities that are served in meditation as well. Finally, we want to emphasize this as part of a process of self-reflection and dialogue, which takes place through not only meditation but nonviolent communication, and that all of this is grounded in an inclusive awareness that gives us a basis to speak with one another and be with one another. Thank you.